The humiliation didn't start with the wine being accidentally spilled down my back. It started the moment I walked through those heavy oak doors and saw the look of pure disgust on my future sister-in-law's face. I stood there, clutching my worn handbag, feeling every bit the charity case my family had labeled me for years. "Oh, look, the maid finally arrived," Tiffany sneered, her voice carrying across the silent room like a whip. "Tell me, Elena, did you walk here or did you take the bus with the other peasants?" My own brother, Leo, didn't even look up from his champagne. He just laughed, that hollow, arrogant sound that had replaced the brotherly warmth I once knew. They thought I was the failure. They thought I was the one struggling to make ends meet in a tiny studio apartment while they basked in the reflected glory of their high-powered corporate jobs. They had no idea that the very ground they were standing on, the very company that signed their massive paychecks, belonged to me. They saw a girl with no future, but in a matter of hours, they would realize that I held their entire world in the palm of my hand. Have you ever been pushed to your breaking point by the people who were supposed to love you most? Have you ever had to hide your success just to see who was truly on your side? Stick around, because this isn't just a story about revenge. It's about the moment I realized that blood isn't always thicker than water, and silence is the loudest weapon you can own. My name is Elena. For as long as I can remember, I was the difficult child in the Sterling family. Not because I was rebellious or loud, but because I didn't fit the mold of the corporate dynasty my parents had built. My father, Marcus Sterling, was a man who measured worth in stock options and net profit. My mother, Beatrice, was a socialite who viewed her children as accessories to her status. Then there was Leo, my older brother by 2 years. Leo was the golden boy. He was groomed from birth to take over Sterling Global, the massive logistics firm my father founded. He was loud, charismatic, and deeply entitled. I was the quiet one. I was the girl who preferred reading in the garden to attending debutante balls. When I was 18, I made the unforgivable mistake of refusing to major in business administration. I wanted to build something of my own, something that wasn't built on my father's name. I wanted to understand the tech side of the world, the coding, the invisible architecture of the modern age. My father told me that if I didn't follow his path, I wouldn't see a dime of his money. "You'll be a waitress by 20, Elena," he had barked at my high school graduation, "and don't come crawling back when you can't pay your rent." I took him at his word. I left home with nothing but a backpack and a burning desire to prove him wrong. I spent 4 years working 3 jobs while putting myself through a specialized tech university. I ate ramen in cold apartments, worked nights as a security guard, and spent my weekends coding a platform that would eventually revolutionize the way global logistics were handled. I called my company Aegis Systems. I kept my last name out of the filings, using my middle name, Rose, as the primary face of the brand. For 7 years, I lived a double life. To the world, I was the CEO of the fastest-growing tech firm in the country. To my family, I was the disappointment who lived in a bad part of town and probably sold weird computer stuff for minimum wage. They didn't call me for birthdays. They didn't call me for holidays. The only reason I was even invited to this engagement party was because Leo wanted to show off his new fiancée, Tiffany, and he needed a plain sister to make Tiffany look even more radiant. Tiffany was a senior account manager at a firm called Meridian Logistics, a subsidiary I had quietly acquired 6 months ago. She was ambitious, cruel, and obsessed with status. She viewed me as a threat to her aesthetic perfection. Standing in that ballroom, I felt the weight of my secret. I looked at Leo, who was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, and I felt a pang of genuine loss. I missed the brother who used to share his candy with me. I didn't know the man who was currently helping his fiancée mock me for my cheap shoes. The evening took a turn for the worse during the first course of the dinner. The table was set with crystal and silver, and I was seated at the very end, near the kitchen door, a clear signal of my rank in the family hierarchy. Tiffany was holding court at the center of the table, bragging about her recent promotion at Meridian. "The new ownership at the top is very exclusive," she said, tossing her hair. "They only hire the best. My boss told me that the CEO is a visionary. Someone like you wouldn't understand, Elena. It's a world of high-level strategy, not whatever you do with your little laptop." Leo chimed in, leaning back with a smug grin. "Elena probably thinks a server is the person who brings her coffee. Right, sis? Tell us, are you still living in that dump of an apartment? I told Mom we should probably send you a grocery gift card for Christmas, but she said you need to learn the value of $1. The table erupted in laughter. I felt the heat rising in my neck, but I kept my eyes on my plate. I was waiting for one person to defend me, just one. But my parents just sipped their wine, looking ashamed that I was even sitting there in my $20 dress from a thrift store. Then, Tiffany decided to go for the jugular. She stood up, holding her glass, and looked directly at me. "You know, Elena, I'm actually looking for a new personal assistant at the office, someone to handle the dry cleaning and the lunch orders. Since you're clearly struggling, I thought I'd offer you the position. It pays slightly above minimum wage. It would be a step up for you, wouldn't it?" She reached into her clutch, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and flicked it across the table toward me. It landed in my salad. "There's a little advance. Go buy yourself a dress that doesn't smell like a basement." The room went quiet. Even some of the guests looked uncomfortable. This was the moment. The sensory details of the room became incredibly sharp. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the distant clatter of dishes in the kitchen, and the frantic beating of my own heart. I looked at the $100 bill resting on a lettuce leaf. I looked at my brother, who was smirking. This wasn't just a sibling rivalry anymore. This was a violation of my dignity. I realized then that they didn't just think I was poor. They thought I was subhuman because I didn't have the sterling polish. I stood up slowly, the chair scraping against the marble floor with a sound like a scream. "I don't think I'm the right fit for your assistant, Tiffany," I said, my voice remarkably steady. I picked up the $100 bill and handed it back to her. "But I do have some thoughts on the way you've been managing the Meridian accounts. The Q3 reports showed a significant lag in delivery efficiency. Maybe you should focus on that instead of my wardrobe." Tiffany's face went from smug to purple in a matter of seconds. "How dare you speak to me about my job? You don't know the first thing about logistics. You're a nobody. Leo, tell your sister to leave. She's ruining our night." Leo stood up, his face reddening. "Elena, that's enough. You're embarrassing us. Apologize to Tiffany right now or get out. We invited you here out of pity, and this is how you repay us?" My father finally spoke, his voice deep and disapproving. "Elena, go home. You've always been ungrateful. We gave you everything, and you threw it away to live a life of mediocrity. If you can't respect your brother's future wife, you aren't welcome in this house." I looked at my mother, hoping for a flicker of maternal instinct. She just looked away, adjusting her pearls. "It's for the best, dear. You just don't fit in here anymore." I felt a wave of coldness wash over me. It wasn't the cold of the storm I'd lived through years ago. It was the cold of absolute clarity. I had been protecting them. I had been hiding my success because I didn't want our relationship to be based on money. I wanted them to love me for me, but they didn't even like me. They hated the version of me they had created in their heads. As I walked toward the exit, Tiffany called out one last time, her voice shrill and triumphant. "And don't bother applying at Meridian. I'll make sure your name is blacklisted across the entire industry. You'll never work in this town again." I stopped at the door. I didn't turn around. I just pulled my phone from my bag and sent a single text to my chief operating officer, Marcus Vance. The text read, "Emergency board meeting at Meridian HQ in 20 minutes. I'm doing the transition of power tonight. Call the security team and tell them I'm coming in as the owner." I walked out into the cool night air, the sounds of the party fading behind me. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. I walked to the corner where my driver, Jackson, was waiting in a blacked-out SUV. "To the Meridian building, Jackson, and call my stylist. I need the charcoal power suit. We have some firing to do." 20 minutes later, I was walking through the glass lobby of Meridian Logistics. The night security guards, who had seen me in the corporate videos, but never in person, stood at attention. I had changed into a tailored $3,000 suit in the back of the car. My hair was pulled back, my glasses were off, and the invisible Elena was gone. In the boardroom, the senior executives were already gathered, looking confused and anxious. Among them were a few guests from the party who were also high-level employees, people who had witnessed my humiliation just an hour ago. When I walked in, the room went silent. "Good evening," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "For those of you who don't know me, I am E. Rose Sterling, the founder and CEO of Aegis Systems. As of tonight, I am taking an active role in the management of Meridian." Just then, the doors burst open. Leo and Tiffany had followed me, thinking I was going to harass the office or something equally desperate. They were still in their party clothes, looking frantic. "There she is!" Tiffany shouted at the security guards. "She's trespassing! This girl is a fraud! I want her arrested!" The head of security, a man named Miller, stepped in front of them. "Ma'am, I suggest you lower your voice. You are speaking to the owner of this company." Tiffany froze. Leo's jaw literally dropped. He looked at the executives, who were all nodding in deference to me. He looked at the Aegis logo on the wall and then back at me. "Elena? What is this? This is some kind of joke, right? You're the CEO?" "It's no joke, Leo," I said, my voice calm and professional. "While you were spending Dad's money on cars and clubs, I was building an empire. I didn't want you to know because I wanted to see if you'd ever treat me like a human being without a price tag attached to my name. Tonight, I got my answer." I turned my gaze to Tiffany, who looked like she was about to faint. "Tiffany, you mentioned earlier that you were looking for an assistant. I've reviewed your files. Your efficiency is actually the result of overworking your subordinates and taking credit for their ideas. As the owner of this firm, I find your management style incompatible with our values. You are terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Don't worry about the $100 you gave me. Consider it a severance package." Leo stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Elena, wait, we're family. You can't do this. I'm the VP of sales. You need me." "I don't need a VP who mocks his own sister for her clothes. I don't need a partner who sits by while his fiancé insults his family. You're not fired, yet, but you are demoted to the entry-level mailroom. You said I needed to learn the value of $1. Now it's your turn. If you can prove you're a hard worker and a decent person over the next year, we'll talk. If not, you can find a job at a company I don't own. Good luck finding one." The fallout was massive. My parents tried to call me a dozen times that night, shifting from outrage to desperate pleading. They couldn't believe their failure of a daughter was actually the person who saved the family name from the brink of bankruptcy. Because, as it turned out, my father's company had been struggling, and Aegis had been quietly propping them up through contracts for months. I didn't take their calls, not at first. I needed time to heal. Over the next few months, everything changed. Tiffany left Leo, unable to handle the loss of status. Leo, to my utter surprise, actually showed up for his mailroom shift. For the first 2 weeks, he was bitter and silent, but then he started talking to the other workers. He started seeing the world through the eyes of the people he used to look down on. One afternoon, he came to my office, not to ask for his old job back, but to apologize. A real apology. "I didn't see you, Elena," he said, sitting across from my desk. "I only saw what I wanted to see. I'm sorry I was a coward." That was the start of our true reconciliation. I didn't give him his VP role back immediately, but I started inviting him to Sunday dinner, not at a fancy ballroom, but at the small bakery where I used to work. We talked about our childhood. We talked about our father. We started building a relationship that wasn't based on the sterling global stock price. My parents eventually came around, though it took longer. They had to humble themselves and admit that their path wasn't the only way to success. I learned that revenge is a small, hollow thing, but boundaries are powerful. By standing up for myself and revealing the truth, I didn't just win a corporate battle, I won my life back. I moved out of my studio apartment, not because I was ashamed of it, but because I was ready to live in a home that reflected the person I had become, a woman who was no longer invisible. I used to think that the only way to be loved was to be what everyone else wanted me to be. I thought that if I worked hard enough and stayed quiet enough, eventually my family would see my value. But that night at the engagement party taught me a vital lesson. Your value isn't something others give to you, it's something you carry within yourself. They mocked me for my shoes and my dress, but they couldn't see the mind that built a future out of nothing. To anyone watching this who feels like the invisible one in their family or their workplace, don't let their small vision of you become your reality. Keep building in the dark, keep growing in the silence, because one day the storm will clear and you'll realize that you don't need a seat at their table when you already own the whole building. True success isn't about the flex or the revenge, it's about the peace of knowing exactly who you are, whether you're wearing a $20 dress or a $3,000 suit. I'm Elena Rose Sterling, and for the first time in my life, I'm not hiding.